There's a photo on a stranger's Instagram right now. A family of four, matching rain jackets, Buckingham Palace in the background, smiling like they rehearsed it. And just over the mother's left shoulder, slightly out of focus, slightly turned away, there's a man. He doesn't know he's in it. He never does. His name is Desmond. Not that anyone in that photo would know that. To them, he's blur. Background. Part of the scenery, like the iron fence or the gray October sky. But I know his name because I spent 47 minutes standing near him on the mall that Tuesday, watching him exist inside other people's photographs without a single person asking if it was all right. 47 minutes. I counted. Let me set the scene properly because the scene matters here. It was mid-October, one of those London mornings that can't decide what it wants to be. Not cold enough for a proper coat, but mean enough to punish you if you leave the house without one. The kind of morning that smells like wet concrete and bus exhaust and something faintly sweet from the pretzel cart that parks near the St. James's Park gates around 9 o'clock. I was there early. I'm always early to things, which is a character flaw dressed up as punctuality. I had a notebook. I had a thermos of coffee that was already lukewarm. I was doing what I sometimes do when I need to think, just walking somewhere crowded so I could be invisible while I sort myself out. The tourists were already gathering. They come in waves, tourists do. The first wave is the serious ones. People who read guidebooks, who have schedules printed in laminated folders, who stand at the gate with a sense of purpose. The second wave is the families. Kids in wellies, parents with pushchairs, everyone slightly underprepared. The third wave, which tends to show up around 10, is what I privately call the drifters, people who weren't sure what they were doing today and ended up here because the Maps app made it look like a reasonable idea. Desmond was already there when I arrived. He was sitting on one of the stone benches along the mall, the long tree-lined avenue that runs from Buckingham Palace toward Trafalgar Square. The trees had started turning. That specific amber that looks almost artificial under flat London light, like someone adjusted the saturation in post. He was on the bench with a paper cup of something, watching the pigeons with the focused intensity of a man who had nowhere to be and had made peace with that fact. He was, I'd say, early 60s, gray at the temples, a navy blue jacket that had seen better decades, but was clean. Good shoes, I noticed, worn but quality. The kind of shoes that tell you a man used to care very much about how he presented himself, and still maintains the habit even if the reasons have changed. He wasn't doing anything remarkable. That's the whole point. The first photograph happened 9 minutes after I sat down nearby. A young couple, mid-20s, both of them with the particular energy of people who treat travel as content, set up a shot facing the palace. The woman stood in front. The man directed her. It took 7 takes. I know because I watched. On the third take, she laughed at something he said, and he grabbed it, and that was probably the one they used. Desmond was in every single frame. Not prominently. He was to the left and slightly behind, still sitting on his bench, still watching his pigeons. But he was there, unmistakably. A real man living a real moment, folded into the background of someone else's curated memory. They didn't look at him once. Not out of malice. That's the thing I want to be careful about, because it's not a malice story. They just didn't see him. Not really. He'd already been sorted into the category of background in their minds before they'd even raised the camera. The brain is efficient that way. It decides what matters and renders everything else as texture. He was texture. He kept drinking his coffee. The thing that started to bother me, and I didn't expect it to bother me the way it did, was how normal it all was. Every few minutes, someone new. A group of Italian teenagers who spent more time with their arms around each other than looking at the palace. A man in his 40s doing that thing where you hold the phone at arm's length to get the palace behind your own face. A grandmother, sweet, slow-moving, being positioned by her grandchildren with the tender bossiness that grandchildren have. Every single one of them, Desmond, in their photos, in the background, unasked. And I started doing this thing where I was trying to calculate how many photographs he'd been in over the course of his life without knowing. If he came here regularly, and something about the ease with which he inhabited that bench suggested he did, then we're talking thousands, tens of thousands, maybe. His face, his jacket, his navy blur, living on servers in countries he'd never visited, in albums on phones belonging to people whose names he'd never know. There's something in that. I wasn't sure what yet, but something. Around 10:15, a family arrived that changed the quality of the morning. They were American, I think. The dad was the kind of man who wears trainers with jeans in a way that's not trying to be fashionable, just comfortable, which is its own kind of confidence. The mom had that warm, slightly overwhelmed look of a woman managing 3 children in a foreign country, while also trying to actually enjoy herself. The children were a boy of maybe 11, a girl of about 8, and a toddler in a carrier on the dad's chest who was asleep against all reasonable expectation given the noise. They were doing the photograph. The whole production. The dad set up the shot. The mom pulled the 2 older kids into position. Somebody's hood was up and needed to come down. The 8-year-old girl was resisting because she wanted to hold the flag she'd bought from a gift shop, and someone was telling her not to. She won, by the way. She kept the flag, and they took the photo, and Desmond was in it. But this time, this is where it shifts. The little boy saw him. Not the camera. Not the photograph. He turned around after the shot was done, looked toward the bench, and just watched Desmond for a moment. The way kids do. No filter, no social calculation. Just open observation. Desmond must have felt the weight of it, because he looked up. Their eyes met. The boy raised a hand. Just a small wave. The kind of wave you'd give someone you've seen before, but don't quite know. And Desmond smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. The kind that takes up the whole lower half of a person's face and makes their eyes go slightly. He raised his paper cup in a little toast. The boy laughed. "Come on, buddy," the dad said, and the family moved on. That was it. That was the whole exchange. 12 seconds, maybe. But I noticed that after they left, Desmond watched them walk away. He watched until the pushchair and the flag and the matching rain jackets disappeared into the crowd moving toward the park gates. Then he looked back at his pigeons. But something had shifted in him. Slightly. The way a room shifts when someone opens a window you didn't know was there. I should tell you, I wasn't just a passive observer here. At some point, about 20 minutes in, I did something I hadn't planned to do. I moved my bench. I sat closer to Desmond's. Not creepily close. Just within a distance where I could hear if he said something to himself, which some people do when they're alone and comfortable. He didn't say anything for a long time. What he did was finish his coffee. Then he held the empty cup with both hands like he was still warming them. The cup was empty, but he held it anyway, and there was something about that small physical habit, the body keeping a gesture alive after its function is finished, that I couldn't stop looking at. Another photographer, this time a solo traveler, a young woman with a proper camera, not a phone, a DSLR, which in tourist terms signals someone who is taking this seriously. She was shooting the palace from different angles, trying things, crouching, moving left, adjusting. Artist brain. I recognized it. She took one shot that included the bench. That included Desmond. She looked at her screen. She looked at the bench. She looked at her screen again. I thought, for a second, she might walk over. Might ask. Might say something. She moved 3 feet to the right to exclude the bench entirely and took the same shot without him. I don't know why that was harder to watch than the ones who'd taken him without noticing. Maybe because she'd seen him. She'd actually registered him as an element in her composition. And still, the calculation she ran, whatever it was, ended with him outside the frame. Desmond didn't know any of this. He was still holding the empty cup. Here is where I tell you the thing that actually undoes me about this. At 11 o'clock, a young woman came and sat on the far end of his bench. Not with him. Just the bench was there, and she needed to sit, and it's a public bench. She had a guidebook open. She was eating a cereal bar. She read for a bit, then looked up at the palace, then read again. After about 5 minutes, she got up to take a photo. Standard tourist photo. Palace sky, the familiar gold Victoria Memorial statue, catching what little sun was available. She held the phone up, adjusted, got ready to shoot. And then she looked at Desmond. "Excuse me," she said. Her accent. Eastern European, I thought. Check. Maybe you're Polish. Desmond looked up. "Would you?" She paused, searching for the right English. "Could you take? For me?" I try to get with the statue, but my arms are, she made a short arm gesture. Universal language. Desmond looked at her phone. He looked at her. Course, he said. His voice was not what I expected. Quiet. A slight London texture to it, but educated underneath. The accent of someone who grew up one way and lived another. He stood, took the phone. She positioned herself in front of the memorial. He took 3 shots. I saw him checking between each one, adjusting slightly, which was more care than most people take. He handed the phone back. She looked at the photos. Her face opened. Oh, this is very good, she said. You are good at this. He smiled again. That same real smile. Used to have a nice camera, he said. Long time ago. She thanked him. She sat back on the bench for another minute. I think she almost asked him something. I could see the question forming, but then her phone buzzed, and she looked at it, and something in her redirected. She gathered her things and left with a polite nod. And Desmond stood there for a moment with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching her go. Then he sat back down, just sat there with his empty cup and his pigeons and his quietly accumulating mourning, sliding unasked into the photograph albums of strangers. Used to have a nice camera. I thought about that for the rest of the day. I came back on Thursday. I don't entirely know why. I told myself it was the notebook, the project, the ambient research I do when I don't have a real project, but need to feel like I do. But honestly, it was Desmond. It was used to have a nice camera sitting in my chest like a question someone forgot to finish asking. The pretzel cart was there again. I bought one even though I don't particularly like pretzels. There's a comfort in having something to do with your hands when you're watching something you're not sure you should be watching. He wasn't on the bench. I felt stupid, honestly, slightly embarrassed by the specificity of my disappointment. I found a different spot, leaned against the iron fence along the palace perimeter, ate my pretzel, watched the morning gather. Thursday was busier than Tuesday. School half-term, I think. The families were thick on the ground, the particular subspecies of collective chaos where no 2 people in the group are going in the same direction, and someone is always 20 feet behind reading a plaque while the others wait with varying degrees of patience. The photographers were out in force, and I started doing it again, the counting, the mental tally of background people who had no idea. A man in a yellow high-vis vest eating a sandwich on the steps of the Canada Gate. An older woman walking slowly with a wheeled shopping trolley, heading somewhere with the focused purpose of a person who doesn't need to be anywhere tourist-adjacent, but happens to be passing through. A young guy, hoodie, headphones, delivering something on a bike, stopped momentarily to check his phone. All of them, in frames, unasked. It struck me that this was a specifically modern phenomenon, the mass, continuous, casual documentation of strangers, but also that it wasn't, not really. People have always ended up in other people's paintings, other people's sketches, other people's letters home. We stood by the river near the market, and behind us was the most curious-looking fellow in a red hat. The technology changed the scale, changed the volume, changed the resolution. But the thing itself, the way strangers leak into each other's memories, that was old. That didn't entirely make me feel better. He arrived at 11:20. Same bench, same jacket, no coffee cup this time. He had a carrier bag from Sainsbury's which he put at his feet, and then he sat in his characteristic way, which was very still, not rigid, just settled, like a man who has learned the posture of patience the hard way. I should have left him alone. I walked over and said, "Do you mind if I sit here?" He looked at me the way people in London look at strangers who speak to them in public, a rapid internal calculation, assessing threat level, probability of inconvenience, social obligation. He completed the calculation. "Help yourself," he said, a respectful distance. We didn't speak for maybe 4 minutes. "You were here on Tuesday," he said. I looked at him. Was I? Bench near the flower bed. Thermos. So much for being invisible. I didn't think anyone noticed. "I notice most things," he said. Not proudly, just factually. His name was Desmond Achike. He told me that in the same breath as he told me he'd been coming to this stretch of the mall every Tuesday and Thursday for, and here he paused and seemed to genuinely calculate, going on 3 years now, give or take. "Zen?" I asked. "Mostly. Sometimes I don't come in proper rain." A pause. I came once in a hailstorm and felt like an idiot. I laughed. He allowed himself a small one. He was 64, retired, or rather, as he put it, done, which is a different word with different weight. He'd spent 31 years working in print, not writing, not editing, but the physical production of it. Newspapers, magazines, catalogs. The mechanical side, press operators, color calibration, paper weights, and ink densities. The stuff nobody thinks about when they're reading. Nobody ever thinks about it, he said, and there was no bitterness in it, just the plain observation of a man who had spent his career being the invisible infrastructure of other people's visibility. I thought, there it is. Around noon, a stag party arrived. I used the term loosely. It was 4 men, late 20s, not yet rowdy, but carrying the potential. The particular loose-shouldered confidence of men who have been drinking since 10 and have calculated they can sustain the current altitude for several more hours if they're careful. They wanted a photo at the gates. The negotiation of who would take it and who would be in it took longer than the photograph itself, which is always the case. Eventually, one of them conscripted a passing tourist, handed over his phone with the elaborate trust that alcohol makes easy, and the 4 of them arranged themselves in front of the palace railings. Desmond was to their right, not prominently, but there, his navy jacket, his stillness, the carrier bag at his feet. The tourist took the photo. The stag party crowded around the phone to evaluate it. One of them said something, and they all laughed the specific laugh of men, seeing something funny on a screen. Then, one of them looked up at Desmond. "Oi," he called over. Not aggressive. More amused. "You're in our photo, mate." Desmond looked at him. "Photo. You're in the background of it." Desmond looked at the phone the man was extending toward him, the way you might look at something you've been offered that you're not sure about. Then he looked at the photo. I couldn't see his face, but I watched his shoulders. They did something I don't have an exact word for. Not tension, not relaxation, something in between, the physical equivalent of a small private recognition. He handed the phone back. "Sorry about that," he said. "Nah, it's fine," the man said, already losing interest. "It's a good face. Gives it character." They moved on. Their noise moved with them, diminishing. Desmond sat back down. "Gives it character." He stared at the palace gates for a long time after that. "Does it bother you?" I asked. Eventually. It took me a while to find the nerve. He turned to look at me with the expression of a man who wants to make sure he's understood the question before he answers it. "What does?" Being in people's photographs. Without being asked. He was quiet for a moment. Not a stalling quiet, a thinking one. "There's a difference. I didn't used to notice it," he said. "Now I do." He looked down at the carrier bag. "Started noticing about 2 years ago. One of my daughter's friends, she has one of those accounts, lots of followers, she posts everything. She posted a photo from here. The palace. Her and a few others. And I was in the back of it." He stopped. I waited. She didn't know it was me. She didn't know who I was. She posted it, and her followers, thousands of people, they all saw it. And I was in it. And none of them knew, and I didn't know, and nobody asked. "How did you find out?" "My daughter showed me," he said. "She thought it was funny. In a nice way, she meant it nicely. She said, 'Dad, you're internet famous.'" The word famous sat between us for a moment. "Was it funny?" I asked. He looked at the palace, at the iron spires and the stone face of it, the guards visible through the gates in their boxes, the whole performed permanence of the thing. "It was a lot of things," he said. "Funny was one of them. Here's what I've been thinking about ever since, and I want to try to get it right. There's a difference between being seen and being photographed. The tourists who put Desmond in their backgrounds, they weren't seeing him. They were documenting a location, and he happened to be inside it. He was incidental to the image. He was the kind of human detail that, in another era of photography, a professional might have asked to clear the shot or wait a moment, or simply taken in an era when photographs were deliberate and costly and few. Now photographs are free, infinite, consequence-less in one direction. The person with the camera loses nothing by taking it. The person in the background, that's a different calculation. And Desmond wasn't losing anything obvious either. Nobody was exploiting him. Nobody meant anything by it. The stag party man had even shown him the photo, which was more than most people would do, and called it good character, which was offered as a compliment. But there was the thing Desmond said next, which was this: I have a box at home. Photographs I took. Places I went. The camera I mentioned. He looked at his hands. I stopped using it about 6 years ago, around the time my wife died. He said it the way you say a fact you've said many times, the rawness long since worn smooth, but the weight of it still fully present. There are photographs of her in that box. Ones I took. Ones where she knew I was taking them, or ones where she didn't, but she wouldn't have minded. She didn't love having her picture taken, but she trusted me with it. A pause. That's a thing people don't always think about. The trust of it. The trust of it. I wrote that in my notebook. He opened the Sainsbury's bag around 12:30 and took out a wrapped sandwich and a small packet of crisps with the methodical care of a man who has learned to make lunch a real event when it's the middle point of the day that doesn't have many other defined moments. He offered me a crisp. I took one even though it was prawn cocktail, which I also don't really like. There is a social grammar to accepting what someone offers when you're sitting on a bench and they're telling you hard things. We ate in silence for a bit. A tour group arrived, organized, lanyards, a guide with an umbrella raised like a flag. The guide was speaking into a small microphone attached to a receiver that the group members held to their ears. Efficient. The group took a collective photograph with a kind of coordinated ease that spoke of practice tourism, a tour that had done this stop many times. Desmond was in it. The guide's eyes moved across the bench and right past it. Desmond watched the group reassemble and move off, the umbrella bobbing above the crowd until it rounded the corner toward the park. It's not that I mind, exactly, he said. He'd been working this out, I could tell. Working out what the true shape of his feeling was, the way you do when someone has asked you something real and you want to give a real answer. It's more that you go through a lot of your life being background. Background at work. Background in the room. Background in the family when everyone else is the one having the big events. He paused, and then you retire and you think, well, at least now I'm in charge of whether I'm background or not. At least that's mine to decide. He looked at a family who were setting up another shot nearby, and then you find out you're still being put in the background of things. Just by strangers this time. He ate the last of his crisps. My wife would have found that funny, he said. The irony of it. She had a good eye for irony. She had a good eye for irony. Past tense. The specific past tense of people who have stopped correcting themselves. The afternoon light was starting to change, that lateral gold that happens in London around 3 in October, when the sun gets low fast and turns everything briefly generous. The Victoria Memorial caught it. The Palace Stone caught it. The tourists caught it in their phones, pivoting toward it, chasing it. Desmond's navy jacket caught it too. He looked, in that light, like a figure in a painting. Not because he was doing anything cinematic. Because he was just a man on a bench eating a sandwich and thinking about his wife, and the light hit him anyway. A couple 10 feet away were doing a slow pan video, the kind people do for the golden hour, moving the phone slowly left to right across the palace. Desmond moved through their frame at his own pace, at his own angle, indifferent and contained. He didn't know. He never does. And sitting there beside him, watching it happen in real time, I thought about all the photographs. The thousands of them, the tens of thousands. His navy jacket in the background of Parisian Instagram accounts and American Facebook albums and Japanese travel blogs and Singaporean WhatsApp family groups. All those versions of him distributed across the world's storage, carrying no name and no story and no context, just a man on a bench being quietly part of other people's joy. All those photographs, and not a single one of them is his. The third time I came back, I brought my camera. Not a phone, a real one. The one I'd had for years, a battered Olympus that my partner says makes me look like a war correspondent, but is really just what I've always felt comfortable with. It's heavy enough that the decision to lift it feels intentional. That matters to me. I wasn't planning to photograph Desmond. I want to be precise about that. I wasn't going to do to him the thing I'd spent 2 weeks thinking was worth examining. I brought the camera for the same reason. I always bring it to places I'm trying to understand. Because looking through a viewfinder changes how you see. It narrows and selects and forces a commitment that the naked eye is too lazy to make. It was a Friday this time, which was different. Fridays have a different energy on the mall. More spontaneous tourists, fewer organized groups, a slightly loosened quality to the morning, like the week is already exhaling. He was there. Same bench. A new paper cup. The pigeons were back, and he was watching them with his characteristic focus calm, and I thought that either he fed them and I just never seen him do it, or he just found pigeons genuinely interesting, which would be a specific and lovable thing about a person. He saw me before I reached the bench. "You again," he said. "Me again." He nodded at the camera. "You a photographer?" "I'm a person with a camera," I said. "There's a difference." He considered that. "Sit down then." We fell back into the easy silence that had developed between us, which still surprised me each time. The way silence with a stranger becomes comfortable faster than you expect when the stranger is the right kind of person. I watched the morning through the viewfinder without shooting anything. The crowd patterns, the way light moved across the stone. A boy of maybe 4 who'd gotten separated from his parents for 30 breathless seconds before his mother appeared and absorbed him back into herself without breaking stride. A guard rotating at the gate, that mechanical precision of the ritual, the boot steps on stone, the exact turn of the head. An enormous tour coach arrived and decanted 60 people simultaneously, the way a ship unloads a crowd rather than receives one. They were organized around a woman in a red coat who was explaining something in a language I didn't know, holding a clipboard. The photographs began immediately. 60 people, 60 devices, 60 different angles and framings and aesthetic impulses all pointed at the same building. The air filled with the faint electronic click sounds of phone cameras, that artificial shutter sound that smartphones play to simulate a decisiveness the technology doesn't actually require. Desmond was in an unknowable number of those frames. He sat through it like a man who has learned to exist in weather. One of the tour group broke away. She was older, late 70s, maybe tiny and deliberate in her movements, the kind of woman who has learned to save energy for the things that matter and moves accordingly. She had a small digital camera, not a phone. One of those compact ones that people of a certain age often prefer because it feels more like a real camera. She stood a little apart from the group and looked at the palace with a different quality of attention. Not documenting, more like receiving it, taking it in as an experience rather than evidence. Then she looked around. She looked at the bench, at Desmond. She walked over. "Excuse me," she said. Her English was careful, learned, French underneath it, I thought. She was apologetic in the specific French way of older French women who have decided to apologize for inconvenience before inflicting it, which is its own form of courtesy. "I wonder if you know, is there a good place to stand? To get the memorial also? With the palace? I cannot find the angle." Desmond looked where she was gesturing. "You want the memorial in front and the palace behind?" "Yes. The statue also." He stood. He looked at the geometry of it for a moment, genuinely assessing, not just pointing and moving on. "Come here," he said. He walked her to a spot maybe 15 feet to the left and slightly forward of his bench. He stood behind her line of sight. "There. If you go a bit left, yes, there. You'll get both." She lifted her camera, adjusted, lowered it. Yes, I see it." She looked back at him. "You have a good eye. I used to take photographs," he said. "You should again," she said. Simply, like it was obvious. He didn't answer that, but he watched her shoot her frame, patiently, without hurry, and when she looked at the result and made the small sound of satisfaction that people make when a picture works, he watched that too. She thanked him with a warmth that required no translation. She went back to her group. He came back to the bench. "You should again." He sat down and looked at his hands in his lap. I didn't say anything. After a while, 10 minutes, maybe 15, he said, "I took a photograph this week." I looked at him. First one in 6 years. He looked at the palace as he said it. "My daughter left her phone at my house. I was going to drop it back to her, but I had to wait for her to come home. I was in the kitchen. The light came through the window the way it does in the late afternoon. It hit the table. There was a cup on the table, her cup, and a book. Nothing special. He paused. I picked up the phone. I took the photograph. He was quiet. Did you send it to her? I meant to delete it before she came to get the phone, he said. I thought it was silly. An old man taking a photo with his daughter's phone. But I forgot. She came. She picked up the phone. 3 days later, she texted me. He reached into his pocket, slowly, and held the phone toward me. The text said, "Dad, this photo is beautiful. When did you take it?" Below it, his daughter had sent the photograph back to him. I looked at it. It was a kitchen table. Late afternoon light, just as he'd described, the particular long-angle gold that gets serious in autumn. A white mug with a small chip on the handle. A paperback face down to hold the page. The grain of the old wood table. Nothing special. It was beautiful, not in a showy way. In the way that photographs are beautiful when someone has looked at an ordinary thing and seen the actual shape of it. The light was right because he'd understood the light. The composition was right because 31 years of caring about how things are laid out on a surface doesn't disappear just because you stop using it. She wants to frame it, he said. He took the phone back. I told her she was being daft, he added. But the way he said it, the way daft came out soft rather than dismissive, told me he was going to let her frame it. Was probably already glad that she wanted to. There's a particular kind of grief that attaches to things you used to do and stopped. Not the grief of loss, exactly. More like the grief of something still living in you that isn't being used. The skill, the eye, the instinct, still there, waiting, getting dusty in a way that feels like a small daily sadness you've learned to step around. I didn't say any of that to Desmond. He would not have thanked me for it. What I did say was, the woman earlier was right. He looked at me. About the camera, I put mine on the bench between us, not pushing it at him. Just there. That doesn't go. He looked at the camera, looked away, looked back. I'd have to get a new one, he said. Mine was film. I don't know what I'd do with myself. And a digital. You'd figure it out in an afternoon, I said. Which is not a word, but which was its own complete sentence. We sat through another 40 minutes of the morning together. The tour coach group reassembled and reboarded with the efficiency of practiced movement. And then they were gone as suddenly as they'd arrived, and the mall settled back into its quieter rhythm. The pretzel cart had a short queue. The trees moved slightly in a wind that wasn't enough to be called wind. A small child, couldn't have been older than 3, made a determined solo run toward Desmond's bench with the single-minded physicality of toddlers who have recently discovered that legs are technology. She made about 4 feet before her father caught up, swung her up, and she laughed the way small children laugh, which is to say, completely. Desmond smiled. How old are your grandchildren? I asked. Idigasha. 5 and 3, he said. The 3-year-old is exactly like that. All legs, no brakes. Do you take photographs of them? He was quiet for a moment. I should, he said. No, I don't. Not I can't. He said I should, which is forward-facing, which is a different grammar entirely from the one he'd been using. I'll tell you what I did. I lifted my camera. Not at Desmond. I lifted it toward the palace, swept it slowly across the line of the fence, and the trees and the stone. Then I stopped, lowered it. Can I ask you something? I said. He waited. All those photographs you're in, the ones people have taken, the ones you don't know about. I try to find the right shape for what I wanted to ask. Is there any version of that feels not bad? He thought about it with genuine care. There are mornings, he said, when I come here and I feel invisible, like I could get up and walk away and nothing would change. Not for anyone. He looked at the bench, the stone, the ordinary material of the place. And then someone puts me in their photograph. They're not seeing me, but I'm there. I'm actually there in a record that exists. Somewhere. He shifted slightly. My wife's funeral, their photographs. They feel awful to look at, but they're evidence. That it happened. That she existed. That I was there. A pause. I suppose what I'm saying is, it's complicated. Being recorded by people who don't know your person. He looked at me directly. It's complicated being invisible in a way that still leaves traces. Invisible in a way that still leaves traces. I wrote it down. He saw me write it. Don't make me more philosophical than I am, he said. I'm a man who eats sandwiches on a bench. Those aren't mutually exclusive, I said. He made the sound again. but this time it had warmth underneath it. He left at 1 o'clock. He always left at 1 o'clock, I'd learned. Something about the rhythm of the day, the way he'd structured it. Bench until 1. Then lunch somewhere else, somewhere with a chair and a table and a different quality of quiet. He'd been vague about the specifics in a way that suggested it was sacred. He picked up his carrier bag, finished the last of his coffee, stood in his measured way. Same time Tuesday, I said. He looked at me with the combination of amusement and suspicion that had become his characteristic expression when I said something that was technically a question, but was really a statement. You're going to keep coming, he said. Probably. He shook his head slightly. Odhobu. Everyone says that. He picked up the empty cup, looked around for a bin, found one 6 feet away, walked to it, deposited the cup with the precise care of a man who believes small things matter, even when nobody is watching, and then turned back. Bring a better camera, he said. That one's too small. He walked away towards St. James's Park, his navy jacket moving through the crowd, the carrier bag swinging. Within 20 seconds, he was inside somebody's photograph. A woman with a selfie stick turning to get a sweeping shot of the mall's long, tree-lined avenue. The kind of shot where you want the whole theater of the place, the depth of it, the way it pulls you toward the palace. She got it. She got all of it. She got Desmond walking away, slightly left of center, looking like a man who was going somewhere specific and knowing exactly how to get there. She looked at the screen, smiled at what she saw, moved on. I stood there for another few minutes, just watching the place do what it does, receive people, contain them briefly, release them. The guards changed at the gate with their unhurried ceremony. The trees moved in the unhurrying wind. Somewhere right now, on a phone that belongs to a woman whose name I don't know, Desmond Achike is walking away through the golden light of a Friday in October. He doesn't know he's there. He doesn't know her name either. But he's there. He's there in her camera roll, and in the family album of the Americans with a sleeping toddler, and in the background of the Italian teenagers group shot, and in the stag party photo with the good character commentary, and in however many hundreds of thousands of other frames he's drifted through across 64 years of being alive in places other people also wanted to remember. All those photographs, all those strangers, all those moments where someone pressed a button and thought they were capturing a place and captured him instead. Invisible in a way that still leaves traces. You should get that camera. You should take the photographs. You should be the one deciding which morning light is worth keeping.